mass meeting of U.S. ambassadors. Who knows what really took place at this meeting? The sky's the limit with ideas and thoughts. But we'll just have to look into this a little bit further. But a storm is brewing. A storm is brewing. The next thing I want to comment on briefly is, of course, the collapsing the system by design and the window of opportunity for all of us concerned citizens and patriots in this country to protect and preserve our assets, our life, our country, and restore the Constitution and citizen candidates. That window of opportunity is narrowing and getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so we really need to move on these issues. And that's why I've assembled these presenters here tonight to cover some very important subjects and some solutions to the escalating crisis. I'm going to comment briefly on the IRA situation, the IRAs and 401ks. The short bullet point of this is the last known meeting was September 14th, 15th, and 16th with the Labor Board, ERISA, and the Treasury Department. And basically, the proposed bill that's in committee says that we're going to do an allocation of the IRAs and 401ks over into the Treasuries, annuitize it perhaps over a 3% rate, put it in an annuity, and give you a steady periodic payment. When we die and go to heaven, the government keeps about 50% of it. So the 401k IRA deprivatization plan is the brainchild of a woman named Teresa, whose last name I have a tough time with, Ghilarducci, of the Schwartz Center for Economic Policy, who is, of course, funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. So in Chapter 3, the annual report on the middle class, released in February by Vice President Biden and the White House Task Force on the Middle Class, the Obama administration calls for enhancing the retirement options. The plan, as sketched in a 43-page document, calls for the creation of something called guaranteed retirement accounts. They've got a few names slapped on this now. The U.S. Federal Register, page 5,320, speaks about the annuitization of individual 401ks and IRAs as set forth in proposed rules February 2010 last year and revisited in September of last year. And so this is not necessarily something that's imminent because it's in committee, but if it reaches the floor, we need to take a look at it. And certainly, if there was enough of a national emergency, through executive order, this can be done. So we need to keep our eyes on this. There is one bit of new information, and I'll read it to you here, what the financial firms, in the March 9th edition of Business Week notes that new federal regulations designed to promote the conversion of IRAs and 401ks into annuities or other steady payment streams would help drive cash into the government-controlled entities such as AIG. So the long and short of it is there's trillions of dollars of our money that we've saved in these IRAs and 401ks, and the government's looking for it to shore up their balance sheet for a little while, perhaps invite some more foreign capital, and we lose control of the account. So we need to continue to watch this. One last comment before we bring on Dr. Elliott is the IMF. The International Monetary Fund, looking for the date, within the last couple of weeks, had another report speaking about an alternative to the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And rather than read this to you, it basically speaks to perhaps an interim reserve currency through what's called SDRs, special drawing rights. And they may act as and this may or may not happen. There's a lot of things going on in the G20, and China has its own agenda, but the writing is on the wall for the U.S. dollar, and its days are numbered that it will remain the world's reserve currency. So these SDRs would act perhaps as an interim for, quote, stability, and the day the dollar loses its status as the world's reserve currency, life will be very different for us here. And I believe that this can happen tomorrow. Some say it can happen as far out as 3 years, but we are in a red alert stage. Make no mistake about it. The media is lying. Your government is lying to you. and we've got to do something about this. And with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kirk Elliott. For those of you that do not know Kirk, Kirk Elliott is a PhD. His PhD is in public policy and administration. His focus is public economics. His dissertation was on inflation. He's a precious metals expert, a contributor to the Asset Preservation Institute. And by the way, all of the presenters this evening will all be platform speakers at the Save America Convention. And I will talk about that a little bit later. Let's bring Dr. Kirk Elliott on. He also sits on the board of the Patrick Henry College, and he's associated with many important groups throughout this country. Kirk, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you very much. Welcome, Kirk Elliott.
Hey, it's so good to be here, John. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Kirk, I can hear you fine. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Well, you know, I have about 15 minutes tonight, and what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to kind of connect the dots in multiple areas on some different things. John touched on it briefly here. The first thing I want to talk about is this concept of the IMF and their special drawing rights. What if basically that these SDRs, I think, are an interim current world reserve currency that they want, because I have a feeling that the G20, the IMF, this wasn't their plan. I think that their plan was, when the US dollar took a digger and collapsed, that the euro was going to be the world's reserve currency. However, things beyond their control are all just spinning out of control at a rapid rate. The euro is collapsing with Ireland, Italy, Iceland, Portugal, Spain, Greece, France, Switzerland, you name it. Most of the European economies are completely falling out of bed. And so